Daddy, what did you do during the new wave of British heavy metal? If Dad was a Canadian rock star. All right, so this is a follow-up to our show about the American bands, what the American bands did during the new wave of British heavy metal, who seemed to be paying any sort of attention. And I think we arrived at the conclusion that not many, but go watch the show, check it out. So I want to talk about the Canadian bands and what they did during this, and see if anybody seemed to particularly have any wiles, any look at what was going on here, kind of thing. So here we go. And again, I'm going to rank these in order of cluelessness to cluefulness. So let's start with Moxy. Moxy puts out an album in, I think it's 75, then 76, then 77, and 78, right? And the last one's got Mike Ranowski singing for them. Buzz Shearman is gone. And he dies in a motorcycle accident. He isn't dead yet, but I think he dies a little bit later. But anyways, Mike Reno is in, Mike Ranowski, who is Mike Reno of Loverboy. And it's a very light, kind of watered down album. So Moxy just, they leave before they could have had their big glory time. I mean, you think of how amazing Riding High is. If they would have made a record like that in 80 or 81, 82, maybe got over for a tour, they could have been absolutely massive. I think the UK would have embraced them. So they're gone. Teaze's heavy years are 76, 77, and they kind of lighten up. And then the last album, Body Shots, is a little bit of a weird, a little bit of new wave to it. But One Night Stands isn't very heavy as well. So same thing. They are for and done, and they missed the boat on the new wave of British heavy metal. Let's see, who would we put in next? I think I would put in Rush next. So Rush is an interesting situation where they absolutely knew what was going on in Britain. They were watching it. They were touring over there. They were having their records come out as 12-inch releases. They had a lot of ads. They were recording Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres right over there. And so they have those albums. They have Permanent Waves in 1980. Then they come out with Moving Pictures in 1981 and Signals in 82. So in 81, they're making still a pretty heavy album, so they don't have to change to be part of the new wave of British heavy metal, obviously. They are so great as they are. They are inventing progressive metal and reinventing it themselves, and they're on a path that is really cool, and the UK loves them, because I always say that the new wave of British heavy metal, one of the big influences people don't talk about on that is Rush. You hear that in the long proggy ballads. You hear that in the heaviness. You hear that in wanting to be great players. But Rush does go and lighten up and put synthesizers in and stuff when it comes to Signals, and they keep moving that way. So they really zigged when they could have zagged. I mean, this is a band I often think that would have been amazing if Rush looked at the new wave of British heavy metal and said, let's make an album twice as heavy as Moving Pictures. But no, they went the other direction. Triumph is an interesting case where, again, the UK loved those guys. And they would have loved to seen a heavier album out of them moving forward, but they didn't particularly get heavier. They were uncommonly heavy for 1976 and 77 with Triumph and Rock and Roll Machine. But then after that, Just a Game, Progressions of Power, Allied Forces, they were not particularly heavy. And then Never Surrender wasn't very heavy either. And then they went even lighter, more keyboardy, more 80s production values, right? So this is a band that did not, obviously did not pronouncedly try to make something heavy by noticing that something big was happening over there. And, and we got to say, I mean, I keep kind of, I need to remind myself, but it's not just the new wave British heavy metal. Scorpions is doing better. Black Sabbath is doing better. Judas Priest is having a hit finally, right? So all the bands are getting some acclaim. So it's not just, on the shoulders of these young bands. Everybody's doing better because of this uptick in love for metal at this time. Iron Maiden comes out, right? Saxon, Motorhead's doing better. I mean, they're quote unquote in or out, whatever you think, right? But they're doing better. Rainbow's got Joe Lynn Turner. That's an interesting case, but we aren't talking about bands outside of Canada right now. So, okay. April Wine. April Wine is next. So April Wine makes kind of their heaviest album in 1979 with Harder, Faster. They follow it up with a pretty good rockin' album in Nature of the Beast. It's not that heavy. They're actually getting lighter. Power Play is even lighter still. So again, here's a band that was not reacting in a let's get heavier way to the success of all manner of heavy metal bands. Not at all. You know, Ozzy Osbourne's doing well too, right? Michael Schenker Group, UFO is still around, right? So April Wine, no, they're not really. And again, the UK loved them. You saw a lot of ads for April Wine stuff. They played Monsters of Rock, right? I believe it was that very first one, right? 1980. Is that the first one? I think it is. But they were there famously. Okay, next we have as we move up in terms of understanding or cognizance of the new wave of British heavy metal, I would say Anvil. Anvil was on their own path, being a heavy band when nobody else was heavy with their debut album. But also they got even heavier and better. So during the new wave of British heavy metal, they gave us Metal on Metal and Forged in Fire, which were heavier than most new wave of British heavy metal bands. We talk about them being one of the pioneering speed metal bands and a quasi thrash band on the way to thrash. So those guys, absolutely, Lips and Rob would have known their UK metal, and they would have been buying those records and loving it. Going down to Records on Wheels in Toronto here, or A&A or Sam's, or I don't know. Did Vinyl Museum exist at that time? I don't know. But the point is these guys are still and were metalheads, and they absolutely would have known that music, and they would have been influenced by it. So I really do feel that what you get on Metal and Forged in Fire is influenced by hearing a dozen or 24 new wave of British heavy metal albums and being inspired by them, right? And then finally, we got two bands that are kind of new at this point, even newer than Anvil, Santers and Coney Hatch. So two Toronto bands that are new on the scene, but making heavy music. And again, I think these guys were influenced or would have at least known their new wave of British heavy metal. I want to put them at the top of the list along with Anvil because they are bands in Canada making heavy music when heavy music isn't particularly in vogue. But they are in the right place at the right time. It doesn't really commercially work out for any of these three bands in particular. That's a whole nother story. That has a lot to do with not moving away from Canada and moving to LA. Or God forbid, move to London, right? Hang out in London or be there a lot. I mean, any of these bands we've talked about in this episode or even in the American episode, just go spend a lot of time in London during the new wave British heavy metal and play those gigs and stuff, and you will be a bigger band. You will create about buzz. You will sell a lot of records right there in the UK. But no, alas, the problem with a lot of Canadian bands is almost every Canadian band is that they didn't move away, kind of thing. So there you go. That is our list of bands for Daddy. What did you do during the new wave of British heavy metal? If Dad was a Canadian rock star. So there you go. Let us know in the comments below what you think of this idea or who I left out or what I'm wrong about. We have a Patreon. Like and subscribe. Do all that stuff as well. We see our subscription numbers going up, so that's really cool to see. And check out martinpopoff.com for any of my books. I got a pile of Rush books. What do I got for Canadian bands? Just Rush books. Max Webster books coming back eventually. But yeah, just Rush on this list. But yeah, the Iron Maiden book is now around. We've got all the AC/DC at 50, Van Halen at 50, Kiss at 50. We've got Bowie at 75 and Rock and Roll Chameleon Bowie and the Zeppelin book, a whole pile of things. But check that out, martinpopoff.com. PayPal buttons. I sign them, send them out from the office. And check out my audio podcast, History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff. There you go. Go play some Coney Hatch.